Welcome at Olive X, the most courageous platform for activists. Today we are going to analyze an interview of a senior Hamas member, Basem Naim, in an interview at Arabiya. Well, Basem Naim claims to be a senior Hamas member. I don't know if it's true because his answers are really it doesn't sound like a Hamas member, but we will analyze that. And Al Arabiya is a state-owned media of Saudi Arabia. They talk about the ceasefire when it was announced 10 days ago. Yes, let's start.
News with senior Hamas official Basem Naim. After 14 long and painful months, a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has been secured. On Sunday, the world will witness a pause in the fighting and the start of a prisoner exchange. But this deal is not the end of the crisis. It's merely the beginnings of a solution, and there's a long road ahead. So let's bring in our...
So what is remarkable about this introduction? She mentions the ceasefire. There is a difference between a pause and a ceasefire. A pause means a pause. It's a break and then you'll continue. That's the narrative that Netanyahu wants us to believe in because he wants to continue a fight. It's a ceasefire. It's not a pause. Stage one is a ceasefire. And this Basem Naim doesn't correct her. He should have said that. It's not a pause. Also, during the ceasefire negotiations, Israel wanted to call it not a ceasefire, but a cessation of hostilities, which is a lighter version of a ceasefire. And a pause is even more light. And she also said this is not the end of the crisis, because Israel doesn't want to end it. She emphasized on that, but she can say it's a beginning of an end. Anyways, then we go to minute 3.
Sure that this deal was signed. Do you think it could have been successful without Donald Trump taking the White House in just a few days' time?
On one side, no, I couldn't imagine that this could be possible without the pressure from the coming administration led by President Trump.
It's really true that he put pressure on Netanyahu, which Biden didn't, and that made the difference. That's true. But it's not everything. If you're a senior member of Hamas, you should also emphasize on your movement, on your fighters. A war of 15 months long without giving up against such a strong enemy. You should credit yourself, your fighters, which Basem Naim didn't do. And then a quote of Basem Naim, why the ceasefire didn't occur before.
What was the problem? That Netanyahu was struggling in his cabinet to get a clearance for this deal, but he failed until now. Therefore, he wants to transfer this entire...
So he is saying that Netanyahu struggled to get enough support in his cabinet. That's what he is saying. And that is also the narrative of Netanyahu, like about Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. Look, they don't support it. But the reason was not because Netanyahu didn't have enough support of his cabinet. The signed ceasefire showed there was an overwhelmingly majority in the Israeli cabinet who voted in favor of the ceasefire. But to use Smotrich and Ben-Gvir as an excuse means like Netanyahu is being hostaged by them. He has to do what they want, and there is no responsibility to put on Netanyahu. So what this Basem Naim said is factually incorrect. He says that in the previous rounds, Netanyahu didn't have enough support of his cabinet. That's not true. He did have. And that is also the same narrative as Netanyahu is telling us. So very remarkable statement by Basem Naim. And then an interesting question about the victory.
October 7, let me ask you, Since the start of this conflict, much of Gaza has been destroyed. It's reduced to rubble. More than 46 Palestinians have been killed, and many of Hezbollah's allies, including Hezbollah, have been very severely weakened. Does Hamas still consider this operation a victory? Was it worth it to end the occupation when you consider everything that has come after?
Well, she asks a question but also answers the same question, which is no, because it happened a lot. I mean, a lot of things occurred. The basic thing is that you cannot blame genocide to the victim. Israel did all of this, and Hamas couldn't have known that after 7 October, Israel would react with genocide, which is also supported by the Western countries. One of the Hamas members said that before, you know? You couldn't know that. Nobody could know that. You could know that the reaction would be harsh, but not that there would be a genocide. And also what she is saying about civilian deaths, about Hezbollah and Hamas. I mean, Hezbollah is not a partner of Hamas in the sense that their wars are interconnected. We have seen it, that Hezbollah made a ceasefire agreement with Israel while Hamas was fighting. So it was not that they are that kind of partners fighting for each other. No, it's not that close. And we also saw it in the beginning of the genocide when the war started. Hezbollah started the war, but that didn't make any difference. You know, it was a low intensity fight against Israel. So, and back at the time, the Israeli media have said there is nobody to save the Palestinians, even not Hezbollah, and it was true. So also, was it victorious? Look what Basem Naim says to these questions.
Since October 7th, and to investigate seriously about the positive and negative outcomes of this round of escalation. But I have to say again, October 7th was a response, was an act of defense. It was a reaction to an already existing action, which is the occupation.
It sounds like in your response there you don't really believe that October 7 was a good idea.
Look what she is saying. It's really amazing that a state-owned media of Saudi Arabia is talking this narrative, the same Western narrative. It looks like you don't really believe that October 7 was a good idea. I mean, you can't blame Hamas for the genocide that Israel has committed. It is as easy as that. And what is his shortcoming of this Basem Naim? He fails to say that the war is a victory for Hamas, because winning and losing wars is not about how many civilian people are being killed. They shouldn't be the victim in the first place. It's also not about whether Gaza is a rubble or not. It's also not about the leadership that is killed. But a war is about goals. Do you achieve your goals or not? And Israel clearly didn't achieve its war goals. So it makes a defeat for Israel and a victory for Hamas. It is as simple as that. Look what he's saying.
Between 2000 and 2023, Gaza alone have passed through 4 or 5 stations of aggressions and wars by the Israelis. In all cases, there was no October 7th. Thousands killed, thousands of houses destroyed, infrastructure destroyed. In the West Bank, where there is no Hamas and there is no October 7th and there is no rockets, 20,000 Palestinians in the last 20 years killed on checkpoints by the army or by the settlers.
There was no 7 October in the West Bank, and look what they're doing. So do you mean to say that, but there was a 7 October in Gaza, so Israel is right in doing what they do in Gaza? That's ridiculous, you know? He says there is There was no 7 October in the West Bank, and look what Israel is doing to the West Bank. But there was a 7 October in Gaza, so Israel is right to do that? I mean, the reaction of Israel is totally out of context. It's totally disproportionate. Anyways, let's go on. 1450.
I think, though, that Hamas has improved the situation of the Palestinian people in Gaza in the last 14 months.
What a ridiculous question. You know what international law says about this? When an occupying force is in your country, that occupying force is responsible for the people, about their safety, their healthcare, their food, everything. It was even not Hamas who was responsible for the civilians the past 14 months. It was Israel. They are the occupying force. That's international law. So the question is really stupid, and the answer is it's as stupid as the question. I can't even show you. 1950.
The national community, though, often finds it difficult to separate the Hamas political wing from the Hamas military wing, especially after what they have seen in the last 14 months. So Gaza, the Palestinians, certainly need international support to rebuild the devastated region. If they require Hamas to have no part in the rebuilding of Gaza, will Hamas accept that?
What we have seen from Hamas the last 14 months is that they killed soldiers, Israeli soldiers, and they're rightfully to do that. They fired some rockets to Israel with 0 deaths. I mean, we have only seen brutality from Israel, not from Hamas, but she fails to criticize Israel in the whole interview. Look at his answer.
I have said it clearly. We are ready already months to hand it over to anyone who is acceptable at the Palestinian level and at the international level. We are a resistance movement. We are not a ruling.
So we are ready to hand over power is basically what he says, but that is not true. Hamas will stay in Gaza after the war. There can be some committees, but these are civilian, about civilian matters, not about security or military. That will Hamas do. And regarding the question, I was to forget to say one more thing. The interviewee says maybe in that scenario then that the international community will not help to rebuild Gaza. But that's not true, because the deal is already signed and Hamas was very clear about their conditioning for signing the deal. It's a 3-phase deal. One, end of the war. I mean, ceasefire is phase 1. Phase 2 is a permanent end of the war. And phase 3 is the reconstruction of Gaza. So that is already signed. And then you cannot say now, oh yeah, Hamas is in power, we don't gonna rebuild. No, then you shouldn't have signed the deal in the first place. So it was also one of the conditions of Hamas from the beginning. That the reconstruction should be part of the deal, and that's it. And if Netanyahu has signed the deal, why should the international community say no? 22.
Talk about what is needed in Gaza. We are hearing numbers, 46,000 people dead, so much of the region destroyed. But there are also reports, I note a report published in the Lancet Medical Journal suggesting that that death toll could be far, far greater. From your understanding, give us a sense, if you can, of the situation on the ground, the death toll that you believe, and what needs to be done first as soon as this conflict is on pause.
Again, she says pause, but it's not a pause.
Thank you very much. This is a very important question. I, as a former Minister of Health and Minister of Youth and Sport and Minister of Social Affairs for some time, I can respond in some figures, which is not 100% accurate now because it has to be updated, but we are talking about at least 50,000 Palestinians killed. 70% of them are women and children, and the rest, most of them are elderly.
What he is saying here is it's again very remarkable in the sense that let me come. He says at least 50,000 deaths. After the interview, he asked the question. There is a Lancet report of far more. So he doesn't go into the question that it is more than 50,000. He says at least 50,000, but that is the identified death, only the identified death. And the last report of Lancet 2 weeks ago said it is 40% more than that. Then they also include the missing persons. But in November, Lancet had a far higher number, at least 160,000 deaths, the indirect deaths included. And this means that people who died from a lack of medicines, lack of medical care, and lack of food. That's also the responsibility of the occupiers. So you can put these numbers on the victims list of Israel's genocide. And there are some estimations, realistic estimations, that says there are 300,000 deaths. That makes 10% of Gaza has been killed. It's an extreme high percentage. 10% of the people of Gaza has been killed in 15 months of war. And that's a very realistic number. 10%, that's extreme high. 1% is already extreme high. But this Basem Naim doesn't mention it at all. He doesn't mention the indirect deaths. He doesn't mention the missing people. He just said at least 50,000. No, it's not at least 50,000. It's at least 150,000. At least 150,000. The 50,000 are only the identified deaths, Mr. Basem Naim. How can you minimize the cruelty on your people? How can you do that? I think that Basem Naim he's not a member of Hamas. He claims he is. He has a lot of media attention. Well, in general, the media doesn't give Hamas much space. And if they do, they attack them. They attack like we have seen with Osama Hamdan, the CNN interview. They only attack. They don't give you space to tell your story. And this Basem Naim had in the past a very high number of followers on social media. But this is what we call black propaganda. Al Arabiya is not pro-Palestinian at all, like the government of Saudi Arabia is not. They are pro-Zionist. And in their media coverage, they can't say it directly, so it is indirectly. It's very bad. It's very bad. So this interview was very bad. The questions were actually an insult, and the answers were as bad as the questions, which you will doubt about the truth, about if it's real, which you will doubt about the authenticity of it. That was the word where I'm searching for. Is Basem Naim really a Hamas member? So, Hamas should see. Hamas has a very good media policy. They make good movies, good videos, And if I see that, I think they also should see this, that his answers are just wrong. He minimized it. He just needed to say, you can't put the blame on the victims when you talk about genocide. There is no excuse for committing genocide. That's it. No excuse. Anyways, this was it. Thank you for watching. Follow OliveX. Follow OliveX, like the video, share it, check our website, olivex.nl. Subscribe to our newsletter, OliveX, the most courageous platform for activists. Thank you.